Welcome back for another video. Wildcard active. Last game week was hilariously bad, and although I'd already decided that the wildcard was going to be used for this game week, it was very clear as soon as the button was pressed on Saturday evening that it was the right decision. There was an opposite chart that popped up on my feed the other day which caught my eye. Man United have had the hardest first 5 fixtures of all teams, and yet they've got the highest XG and the most shots taken. But look at the opposite end of this graphic. Aston Villa have had the easiest run, and yet Rodgers and Watkins with no goal involvements. There's been some all-timer moments on the channel over the years, like, has anyone been around long enough to remember the Edison and Kepa rotation that cost about 50 points? And Digne's own goal to wipe his own clean sheet in the final minutes of a game. There was a Dennis red card in the first match of a double game week. Rodgers and Watkins, 5 blanks in a row, 10 blanks with the best fixture run in the league, can definitely go in the imaginary Hall of Fame. I mentioned on the transfer plans video as well last weekend that the earliest opportunity I actually had to sell either was Gameweek 4, and Sarr and Mateta were the two that I looked at, but even then they wouldn't have made any difference really. Like, Mateta outscored him by 4 points since then. Gakpo returning is opening 2 games and 3 blanks in a row against the likes of Burnley and Everton, unexpected. Sanchez getting a red card as well, absolute killer. And of course Reiners with the assist and DEFCON on the bench. He didn't actually reach the DEFCON points in the end after the final recalculation. He was on 11 DEFCONs, but the points were already locked in by that point, so he kept the 2 points. Anyway, I'm quite excited by the wildcard. Like, my team's had a massive shake-up, and I'm going to be bench boosting straight after the wildcard, so let me run you through the team, but before we do that, let's have a quick look at how you got on. FPL is a very unforgiving game. Talk FPL was on here, if I recall, with one of the best scores not long ago. And he says, I can't believe it. 3 playing Burnley, 1 playing Sunderland, but 32 points all out. FPL Winish says 26-point bench boost. That is a ridiculously strong bench boost for a single game week. Like, I'd be over the moon if I got that in the double game week even. He had Stack, Dubravka, Dorgu and Rodon on the bench. 26-point bench boost. Yannick says he came 5.6k overall last year and he's got a couple top 100k finish, but this season is brutal. Yannick scored 23 points, and it's a strong team to be honest, and yet Salah's assist was the only return. He had Sanchez's red card as well. FPL Focal sent his team and he says, I got 36 points all out, and I've got to make a video about this as well. God, I'd hate to be him. Last one, and I'm actually really glad this one was sent in because it shows just how quickly things can change. FPL Llama says, from 2.7 million to 194k with a 14-point bench boost, 14. His game week rank was 348th in the world. Now, to go from 2.7 million to top 200k in one go is some go, and I really appreciate you sending that one in. That is some inspiration if I've ever seen it. Let's get into the wildcard team then. In goal, Raya comes in. A mistake not to have gone with him from Game Week 1 in hindsight. Sometimes you just have to ignore the fixtures when it's such an elite defence. I mean, very few of us wanted to go there with Man United, Liverpool, Forest and Man City in their opening 5, but 3 clean sheets is very respectable. The only other goalkeeper that I've been considering on the wildcard is Donnarumma. I'll talk more about that in a minute. In defence, it's Gabriel, Vardiel and Senesi. Now, of course, Timber and Calafiori have been doing better than Gabriel, and if they keep playing every game, I'd expect that to continue, but the question is, does it continue? It's the availability of Lewis Skelly left back and White right back that just puts me off a bit. Will Arteta rotate them here and there, the odd game? Especially a bit later in the year when the fixture schedule gets really busy in December. Even if that happens, like, will the fullbacks get enough attacking returns outside of the benching to make up for it? All things considered, it's close, but I like Gabriel the most. But if one of the fullbacks were to pick up an injury before the next deadline, which is obviously very unlikely, then I'll likely make a switch to one of the fullbacks. Vardiel versus Tarkowski is a close call on the wildcard as well, which would be crazy to say in any previous season, but it's the defensive contributions that just make Tarkowski so appealing. He's got West Ham and Palace home in a row as well. If he keeps a clean sheet in one of those and gets maybe a couple of bonus points, that's a double-digit return without even getting an attacking return. And I'm trying to think, is there a scenario where Vardiel doesn't start? Because that would require O'Reilly or Aït-Nouri in left back and Ake in left centre back most likely, and it just seems improbable, so I'm going for Vardiel. Bournemouth's 3.62 expected goals conceded is the 3rd best in the league after Newcastle and Arsenal. Senesi's hit DEFCON in every game so far as well. Ridiculous value for 4.7 mil. He's looking like a really long-term hold. perhaps a sell in like game week 19 when their fixtures turn heading into the new year. So if I can keep him for 3 or so months, that's great news. I want as little areas as possible in the team that needs attention. In midfield, it's Ndiaye, Fernandes, Reinders and Semenyo. I've played around with a draft that's got Foden over Ndiaye, and then I have to go for a cheap defender instead of Vardy for 4.5 mil. I really like that as well, and it does have potential to perform better. Like, Foden's the sort of player, it just wouldn't surprise you if he bags a hat-trick against Burnley. It boiled down for me to the fact that the Foden path means having no City defence coverage long term, or at least not for a while, whereas Foden, if I go for him, it'd ultimately be for 3 or so game weeks probably, whereas there'd be no plan to sell Vardy, which on paper makes that a slightly more sensible path. And Ndiaye's done surprisingly well for Defcons. I think he's hit it the last 2 games now. He's on penalties, 2 goals, 1 assist, plus 4 Defcon points. Last season, Everton were the 4th worst team for non-penalty expected goals. And you'd expect some improvement, wouldn't you, after the reinforcements like Dewsbury and Grealish. And yeah, although it's a small sample size, there is a clear improvement. They're now the 5th best team on that same metric. Better late than never, Semenyo comes into the team as well, while Bruno and Reinders are 2 of the very few players that have stayed. Only Haaland and Bumo, Antony and Mateta have got a higher non-penalty expected goal involvement. Non-penalty XGI is a really useful metric because, as the name suggests, it excludes penalties, which have got about 0.79 XG. Like, you can have a player who's on 3.95 XG just from taking 5 pens and no shots outside of that, which can make their stats look better than they actually are. Scout provides both stats in the members area, XGI and non-pen XGI. Anyway, the underlying point I'm making is he's done fantastic outside of the penalty he's taken as well. Palmer's injury has actually saved me a bit of a headache because it was him or Bruno, and it was only one or the other on the wildcard had I included Palmer as well. I was actually leaning towards Bruno, but now it's both in the team and I've got better defence. By the way, Ghana didn't qualify for AFCON, so after all that, with the 5 free transfers we're all getting later, key players like Semenyo and Kudus aren't even going, they didn't qualify. Minte as well didn't qualify. Imagine if Salah doesn't actually become a relevant FPL asset this season and we're all sitting on 5 transfers with no AFCON players to sell in Gameweek 16. My front 3 is João Pedro, Gyökeres and Haaland. So Haaland's got a yellow flag now, what's the deal there? Well, Pep said the following: recovery yesterday, didn't train. Training is today. I didn't see him and the rest of the players yet, but hopefully he can be ready for the next weekend. My read is that this is just classic Pep talk. We've heard it over the years. He's often intentionally vague. He's going to sit the League Cup out, Haaland, and I think he'll return versus Burnley on Saturday in the starting 11. Unless anything changes, he's in the team and he's my captain. 6.26 non-penalty XG this season to Salah's 0.43. There's night and day between their stats currently. You can never rule Salah out, and he did show us against Atletico what he's still capable of, even against the best teams. Game week 12 could be the potential switch back to Salah from Haaland. That's when Liverpool's run is Forest, West Ham, Sunderland, Leeds, and then he's off to AFCON and we've got the 5 free transfers. By the way, Haaland's 6.26 expected goals on his own is better than, as an entire team, Brentford, Fulham, West Ham, Forest, Newcastle, Sunderland, Wolves, Leeds, Burnley and Villa have all managed individually. One thing I'll probably take into future seasons as a lesson is when 2 players are relatively close, which before Game Week 1, Watkins and João Pedro were for me personally, then just go with a much higher owned one and ride the template early on. It sounds mad to compare them now, but when you cast your mind back to pre-Game Week 1, João Pedro was a pretty unproven FPL asset. Like, he took loads of pens last season and he was really patchy with his form, whereas Watkins had scored over 168 points in 4 of his last 5 seasons and averaging 189 points per season those years. He also felt a lot more secure because, of course, at the time, Delap was in the picture as well. But yeah, João Pedro has just been immense early on and a mistake not to go with him. And he was resting the League Cup as well, which is encouraging. Gyökeres has had a pretty average start so far, 3 goals in 6 games, 2 against Leeds, 1 of course which was a penalty. However, the fixtures are just unbelievable from Game Week 7, so I'm still backing him as a pick. I did buy him back in Game Week 3, I think it was, to potentially try and get ahead of the template and save my wildcard, but yeah, in the end, I needed to use it anyway. He's a flat track bully type player, and it could be these easier upcoming games where he thrives. West Ham home, Fulham away, Palace home, Burnley and Sunderland away, all in a row. What about Isak then? Ekatike's just picked up one of the stupidest red cards of all time for taking his shirt off in a League Cup game after equalising against Southampton midweek, and he's now going to miss Gameweek 6 entirely. Isak's 10.5 mil still though, like no price falls yet, so I'd have to make sacrifices somewhere. I'm not comfortable making them right now. Let's be honest, this draft is looking pretty much like the same one I'm seeing around a lot right now, and for me honestly it just more or less picks itself. I want to go double Arsenal defence. Vardiol versus Tarkowski is debatable. Senesi picks himself. I think Ryan just makes sense. Semenyo, Bruno, now that there's no Palmer. And Dyer versus Enzo versus a Brighton mid like Mitoma I think is an interesting one. Chelsea fans seem pretty unhappy with Enzo, and although he did do really great in Game Week 2 and 3 without Palmer, I think I prefer Dyer right now over either him or a Brighton mid. And then of course there's like João Pedro, Haaland picks himself. I think Evan Nilsson over Gyökeres is a pretty sound pick as well, but again I think Gyökeres just makes sense with those fixtures. Anyway, on the bench it's Dubravka, Stack, Anderson and Mukiele. One combination I'm still looking at is Donnarumma and Saliba instead of Raya and Vardiol. So it's the same two defences, just flipped the other way around. Raya and Vardiol is 0.2 mil cheaper, but Donnarumma and Saliba is slightly more nailed, but there is a chance Vardiol's completely nailed anyway. Basically, all the other thing is Palmer has Sunderland home in Game Week 9. I know he's injured right now, but that's about a month away, and that would be a really nice time to buy Palmer back potentially. Gyökeres or João Pedro would have to make way to fund that though, and then sell one of Semenyo or Ndiaye. However, what if Palmer is hypothetically out for a while? Well, suddenly Saka looks like a really interesting option for 9.8 mil in a few weeks time. Though I am on triple Arsenal of course, either way, whatever way I do the wildcard. So I'd have to sell a defender to help fund that and use 3 transfers. In that scenario, I would rather be on the Donnarumma combination and sell Saliba to enable Saka than the Raya combination and sell Gabriel, if that makes sense. So there is also some merit for Donnarumma, even if that combination is 0.2 million more. It's not the best Game Week 7 bench boost. It'll be Dubravka against Villa, Stack against Spurs, Anderson against Bournemouth and Mukiele against Man United. Delaying it to Game Week 8 can work, however it's after an international break and I'd still have Ndiaye versus City and Anderson against Arsenal. So although I could have, Dubravka and Rodon or Esteve who play each other, it's more or less the same really. There are weaknesses either way. Stack would be in the starting 11 over Ndiaye realistically. We just added a new filters feature on FPL.page in the Focal app. So on the statistics widget, you can filter anything you like a minimum of, 10 defcons per 90. And I was looking at defcons just now, which is why I mentioned it. And I noticed how incredible Mukiele's been. He's averaging 14 DCs per 90. He started every game since Game Week 3 and he's hit the threshold all 3 times. They have had some easier games of course, but Sunderland are the 6th best team for expected goals conceded so far this season, so he is tempting me over Rodon, who's got Spurs home in Game Week 7 on the bench boost. Signed him from PSG as well, Champions League player for Leverkusen last season. It's a serious signing. Sunderland fans seem to be thinking that Ballard's not good enough to start ahead of him or Alderete. Worst case scenario, he does come in and Mukiele moves to right back where he can play as well, but he's just too good to drop seemingly on performances so far. Lee's defence has been decent as well in fairness, so I might still stick with Rodon. He's not too bad for DCs himself. This team's got 0.4 million in the bank, annoyingly short of upgrading Mukiele to a 4.5 mil defender, but perhaps having that banked will be a lifesaver somewhere down the line. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, hit like and hit subscribe. We'll be back again on Thursday with a look at what the top all-time managers are doing this week. Lots of chips active. And on Friday, the #1 all-time manager Tom Dolimore is also wildcarded, so we'll get to see his team. See you soon for the next one.